The air in the studio was thick with anticipation. The audience, a mix of loyal viewers and casual onlookers, leaned in as the host, a well-known liberal firebrand, prepared to challenge Hollywood icon Sylvester Stallone. She had built a reputation for cornering guests, twisting narratives, and turning interviews into viral takedowns, but this time she had chosen the wrong opponent. With a smirk, she launched into her first question, laced with condescension and designed to embarrass. Stallone, sitting calmly, his presence alone commanding respect, listened. He knew the game. He had seen it before. But what he did next would leave the entire country talking. In just a few words, he flipped the script, turning the trap into a moment of reckoning. The audience gasped. The host stammered, and within seconds, the balance of power in the room shifted. This wasn't just another Hollywood interview, it was a moment of raw, unfiltered truth. Before we get into today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's get started. The network had planned this for weeks. Behind the scenes, producers and executives huddled together, carefully crafting the perfect ambush. The host, Rebecca Monroe, was their chosen weapon, a seasoned interviewer known for her ability to manipulate conversations, twist words, and put her guests on the defensive. Her show thrived on controversy, and tonight, Sylvester Stallone was the target. They had studied his past interviews, searching for moments of vulnerability, looking for anything they could exploit. The strategy was simple. Bait him with a question so loaded, so deliberately offensive, that he would either snap, giving them the viral clip they wanted, or stumble, allowing them to paint him as outdated, irrelevant, or worse, problematic. The audience had been hand-picked, filled with those who would laugh on cue and react exactly as the producers instructed. The stage was set. The lights dimmed slightly as Monroe took her seat, her smile deceptively warm. "Welcome, Sylvester," she purred, gripping her note cards a little tighter. The cameras zoomed in, and as Stallone adjusted in his chair, unaware of the storm about to come his way, the first question was about to drop. One designed to humiliate, to undermine, to make a legend look like a fool. Rebecca Monroe leaned forward, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. The tension in the studio was thick, the audience waiting for their cue, like a pack of hyenas circling their prey. "So, Sylvester," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "you're still trying to prove that guys like you, men of a certain age, can still be action stars. I mean, isn't it time to hang it up?" A few chuckles rippled through the audience. The trap was set. Stallone's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained composed. "I don't prove anything. I do what I love," he replied, his voice steady. Monroe pounced. "Come on, Sly. I mean, let's be real here. People say your era is over, that action movies should evolve past muscle-bound tough guys, that the modern audience wants something more intelligent." The word dripped with thinly veiled insult. The audience erupted into laughter, eating it up. The camera zoomed in on Stallone's face, hoping to catch even the slightest flicker of discomfort. But the man had faced worse. "I don't think there's anything unintelligent about standing up for yourself," Stallone countered. But Monroe cut him off with a mocking laugh. "Oh, sure. But you see, that's exactly what we're talking about," she said, turning toward the crowd, playing them like a seasoned performer. "This whole tough guy act, it's outdated. Maybe you just don't fit in anymore." More laughter, a few exaggerated gasps. Stallone shifted in his seat, his patience wearing thin. I think the audience decides that, not you. Monroe waved a dismissive hand. Oh, of course. But let's talk facts. Hollywood is moving in a different direction. Some people, let's say critics, argue that men like you, men who built their careers on old-school masculinity, are part of the problem. Maybe it's time to step aside. The audience whooped as if she had landed a knockout punch. The energy in the room shifted. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was an execution. Stallone exhaled through his nose, his fingers tapping against his knee. And what problem would that be? He asked calmly. Monroe grinned, sensing victory. Toxic masculinity, she said, dragging out the words for effect. The crowd erupted. Some clapped, some booed. The moment was designed to go viral. Stallone opened his mouth to speak, but Monroe bulldozed forward. I mean, don't get me wrong. You had your time. But isn't it time for Hollywood to leave men like you behind? The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Cameras zoomed in. Stallone, Hollywood royalty, being publicly declared obsolete. The headlines were writing themselves. The producers in the control room grinned. They had their moment. They had their soundbite. But what they didn't realize was that the legend in front of them wasn't done talking. Not yet. The smirk on Rebecca Monroe's face widened as the audience erupted into a mix of laughter and applause. She had him cornered, or so she thought. Sylvester Stallone, the old-school action hero, the relic of a bygone era, was being publicly dressed down on live television. This was the moment that would go viral, the clip that would cement her dominance in the industry. But then, something shifted. Stallone didn't squirm. He didn't lash out. He simply leaned back in his chair, a slow, knowing smile creeping onto his face. The reaction was unexpected. The audience, still caught in the momentum of Monroe's attack, started to quiet down. The laughter died out, replaced by an anticipatory silence. Stallone nodded slowly as if considering her words. Then, in that unmistakable gravelly voice, he said, "You know, Rebecca, it's funny. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've been called a lot of things, washed up, outdated, too old, too slow. And yet here we are. You sitting there, making your career off talking about mine." The shift was instant. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The smirk on Monroe's face faltered just slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, come on, Sly. That's not what this is about." Stallone cut her off, his voice still calm, but now carrying a quiet authority. "No, because I think it is. You see, Rebecca, you don't really want a conversation. You want a moment, a headline, a soundbite. You don't ask questions to get answers. You ask them to get reactions." The audience let out a collective ooh. The producers in the control room shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't supposed to happen. Monroe laughed, though the nervous edge in it was impossible to miss. "Oh, Sly, let's not get dramatic. I'm just pointing out the obvious." "The obvious?" Stallone interrupted again, now leaning forward. "The obvious is that people like you love to talk about what's over in Hollywood. You love to decide who's done. But let me ask you something, Rebecca. When was the last time a movie of yours made $1 billion? The audience gasped. Monroe stiffened. The room suddenly felt smaller. "I'll wait," Stallone added, tilting his head. Monroe opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence was deafening. Stallone continued, his tone steady, but cutting. "See? Here's the thing. You can sit there and mock men like me. You can say we're past our time, that we don't fit in anymore. But let me tell you something, Rebecca. The audience decides who's relevant. And last I checked, they're still showing up. A wave of applause erupted. Monroe's grip tightened around her cue cards. This was not going as planned. And another thing, Stallone went on, his voice rising slightly. You want to talk about masculinity like it's a bad thing, like being strong, being tough, standing up for yourself? That's suddenly a crime. That's toxic now. The audience was turning. The murmurs were growing. Monroe shifted in her chair. Stallone shook his head. Let me tell you something, Rebecca. Strength isn't toxic. Weakness disguised as moral superiority is. Boom. The crowd erupted, cheering, whistling. Some even stood. Monroe's face was pale, her control slipping. She needed to regain ground. Fast. Well, that's a very interesting perspective, Sylvester, she said, forcing a laugh. But let's be real. Hollywood is changing, whether you like it or not. Stallone nodded. It is. And yet, the people who try to cancel men like me always seem to be the ones who disappear first. Another massive reaction from the crowd. Monroe's face twitched. She wasn't used to being on the defensive. That's not what this is about. She tried, but Stallone wasn't done. You want to talk about evolving past tough guys while cashing checks from superhero movies that are just modern action flicks with CGI, he said, shaking his head. You talk about how men like me need to step aside, but the moment one of these new so-called stars tries to do what I do, they get exposed for not having what it takes. And then, suddenly, Hollywood wants the old guys back. More applause. The internet was already taking notes. Monroe's frustration was evident now. Well, Sylvester, I think we can agree. The times are different. He nodded. They are. But people don't change as much as you think. They still want heroes. They still want to see someone fight for what's right. And no amount of think pieces or smug TV segments are going to change that. The audience was fully with him now. Monroe knew it. The producers knew it. And the internet was about to have a field day with it. The internet exploded within minutes. Clips of Sylvester Stallone's epic takedown flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Hashtags like Stallone owns Rebecca and Hollywood hypocrisy shot to the top of the trending list. Fan pages dissected every second of the exchange, praising Stallone for standing his ground against the smug condescension of mainstream media. Others shared side-by-side comparison of Monroe's past interviews, highlighting how she had consistently tried to belittle older male actors while praising younger, untested Hollywood newcomers. The hypocrisy was undeniable, and people weren't holding back. Within hours, reaction videos from YouTubers and influencers started pouring in. Some were laughing at Monroe's stunned silence, while others analyzed how Stallone had systematically dismantled her argument with pure logic and confidence. Conservative commentators called it a masterclass in handling media manipulation, while even some moderate voices admitted that Monroe had overplayed her hand. The backlash wasn't just from Stallone fans. Many viewers who had been indifferent to him before were now rallying behind him, seeing him as a symbol of old-school resilience in a world obsessed with manufactured outrage. Sponsors of Monroe's show started facing pressure. Comment sections under their brand pages were flooded with angry viewers demanding accountability. Why are you supporting someone who openly mocks legends like Stallone? One user wrote under a major car company's Instagram post. Another added, "If you don't drop her, we're dropping you." It didn't take long for brands to take notice. Within 24 hours, 3 major advertisers quietly pulled their commercials from the network. While the station tried to downplay it, claiming it was just a routine shift in advertising strategy, insiders leaked emails revealing that the backlash had sent them scrambling. Meanwhile, celebrities began weighing in. Some Hollywood elites tried to defend Monroe, claiming that Stallone was just overreacting and that media scrutiny was part of being a public figure. But this only made things worse. Fans dug up old interviews where these same elites had demanded respect for their own legacies, but now seemed comfortable dismissing a veteran like Stallone. The double standard was glaring. Then came the political voices. A few prominent figures took to social media, calling out Monroe's bias against traditional masculinity. Funny how the media always says they want strong women but can't handle strong men, one senator tweeted. Another conservative commentator declared, Stallone just did what millions of Americans wish they could do, call out the arrogance of the Hollywood elite to their faces. The debate raged on, drawing more and more attention to the controversy. Even mainstream news outlets couldn't ignore it. Morning talk shows debated whether Monroe had gone too far. While some tried to paint Stallone's response as an overreaction, the sheer volume of public support made it difficult to push that narrative. Polls conducted by independent media groups showed overwhelming support for Stallone, with nearly 80% of respondents agreeing that Monroe had crossed a line. The network executives were in panic mode. Monroe's credibility was in free fall, and it was becoming clear that this wasn't just going to blow over, but the worst was yet to come. As the controversy continued to spiral, Stallone wasn't content with just letting the internet handle the fallout. He had spent decades in Hollywood, navigating its ruthless politics, and he knew one thing for certain: silence allowed these smear tactics to continue. He wasn't going to let this one slide. Within days, his legal team announced a defamation lawsuit against Rebecca Monroe and the network, citing intentional misrepresentation, reputational damage, and a deliberate attempt to publicly humiliate him. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the media industry. This wasn't just another celebrity dust-up. This was an A-list legend, fighting back against the very system that had tried to control narratives for years. At first, Monroe and her network put on a brave face. Their lawyers dismissed the lawsuit as a desperate PR stunt and doubled down, claiming that Stallone had overreacted to a lighthearted interview moment. But behind the scenes, panic was setting in. Emails and text messages between Monroe and her producers started leaking. Messages that painted a far darker picture than the network had tried to spin. Whistleblowers from inside the show began speaking to independent journalists, revealing that the entire interview had been orchestrated to make Stallone look bad. One anonymous producer came forward with shocking revelations. The plan was always to get under his skin, they admitted in a secret interview. Monroe kept pushing for a moment where he would snap. They wanted him to either storm off or say something controversial. When that didn't happen, they edited the post-show discussion to make him look aggressive. It was calculated. Another insider revealed that producers had even been instructed to prepare a montage of past Stallone interviews, cherry-picking moments where he was candid or unfiltered, twisting them to fit a narrative that he was outdated and stuck in the past. Then came the biggest bombshell, a leaked recording from a pre-show meeting where Monroe herself was caught saying, "We're not here to celebrate Stallone. We're here to make him answer for all the toxic masculinity he's pushed over the years. The clip went viral overnight, and within hours, the network's credibility crumbled. Stallone's legal team wasted no time. They used the evidence to strengthen their lawsuit, arguing that Monroe and her producers had engaged in deliberate character assassination, rather than legitimate journalism. Public opinion, which had already been strongly in Stallone's favor, now turned completely against Monroe and the network. Even those who had initially defended her were backtracking. Some distanced themselves, claiming they had no idea about the pre-planned ambush. Others simply deleted their earlier tweets supporting Monroe, hoping to avoid backlash. The lawsuit also had financial consequences. The network's stock took a hit as shareholders panicked over the negative press. Sponsors who had already been hesitant began outright pulling funding. Even the network's board members started questioning whether Monroe was worth keeping around. Executives were facing pressure from all sides, and as more damaging leaks emerged, it became clear that this wasn't just about one bad interview. It was about a culture of manipulation within the media itself. Stallone, however, wasn't just out for personal vindication. He wanted to expose the larger issue at hand. In an exclusive follow-up interview with an independent media outlet, he addressed the situation directly. "This isn't about me. This is about how the media plays games with people's reputations. They've done it to others, and they'll keep doing it if no one stands up to them." His words resonated with millions, fueling a growing movement of people demanding accountability from mainstream media. As the legal battle intensified, more former guests of Monroe's show came forward with their own horror stories. A well-known director revealed that he had been coaxed into an interview under false pretenses, only to have his words twisted in post-production to fit a narrative. Another celebrity claimed that Monroe had deliberately cut their mic when they tried to correct her misinformation. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a calculated strategy Monroe had been using for years. The final blow came when a former network executive who had recently retired decided to break his silence. In a tell-all interview, he confirmed what many had suspected all along. These talk shows aren't about honest discussions, they're about control. Monroe was one of the worst, because she truly believed she could reshape reality to fit her agenda. But this time, she got caught. With mounting evidence and growing public backlash, Monroe's network had no choice but to act. The executives were now considering firing her to contain the damage. But Stallone wasn't done yet. His lawsuit was gaining traction, and there was speculation that he might not settle out of court. He had the upper hand now, and he wasn't about to let them escape accountability. As Monroe's show teetered on the edge of collapse, the industry watched closely. If Stallone won this battle, it wouldn't just be a victory for him, it would be a message to all media figures who thought they could manipulate the truth without consequences. The stakes had never been higher. The downfall was swift and brutal. As the lawsuit gained momentum, the network's executives realized they were fighting a losing battle. The leaked recordings, the whistleblower testimonies, and the overwhelming public backlash had completely destroyed the credibility of Monroe's show. Ratings had plummeted, advertisers had fled, and now even her own colleagues were turning against her. The network tried to salvage what little dignity it had left by announcing an internal investigation, but no one was buying it. The final nail in the coffin came when a group of former employees filed their own lawsuit. exposing a toxic culture of deception and manipulation behind the scenes. Monroe had prided herself on being an untouchable force in media, but now she was a liability. The network had no choice but to cancel her show. The official announcement came in the form of a short, sterile press release. Monroe was departing to pursue other opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. She had been fired in disgrace. The fallout didn't stop there. Monroe, once a respected figure in media, had become a symbol of everything wrong with the deliberate public shaming of guests for ratings. The internet did not forget. Every clip of her ambushing guests, every contradiction in her past statements, every moment she had smugly dismissed someone on air was now being re-examined and used against her. She tried to mount a defense, claiming she had been taken out of context, but no one was listening. The damage was irreversible. Meanwhile, Stallone emerged stronger than ever. His viral comeback had turned into a defining moment of his career. His words had resonated with millions who were sick of seeing celebrities, politicians, and everyday people being vilified and misrepresented by the media. Offers for interviews, speaking engagements, and collaborations poured in. His movies saw a resurgence in popularity, and he was no longer just a Hollywood icon. He was now seen as a fighter for the truth. More importantly, Stallone had proven a point. The media could no longer control narratives the way they once did. The power had shifted. Social media, independent voices, and an awakened audience had made it clear. If you lie, you will be exposed. If you manipulate, you will be held accountable. As Monroe faded into irrelevance, Stallone's message only grew louder. It's not about me. It's about standing up when they try to tear you down. And with that, a final message to the audience. If you care about the truth, share this video.